Hi there, and welcome to Unit 9, where we are going to start our multi-week journey into memory. Cognitive psychology really has memory at its center, so we're going to spend several weeks here talking about memory. And in this unit, we're going to be talking about the very first stages of memory. You know, you need memory for everything. If, you're taking an order from a client at a restaurant, or you work for Amazon and you need to deliver packages, you need to remember what time to wake up in the morning, or you're an athlete, all of these activities involve memory in a very central way. So first of all, let's start at the beginning. What is memory? So memory is any time we obtain information and hang on to it, store it, and then we're also able to use that information later. And that information can be visual, it can be auditory, it can be abstract, it can be a physical image of something, it can be your motor system. But the important part is that information is no longer present, right? So memory is obtaining information, storing it, and using it when that information is no longer available to you. So you can say that memory is active anytime your actions or your thoughts or your feelings are influenced by past experiences. Now, on the chart that you're seeing on this slide, human memory is broken down in many different components, many different types of memory, and we will be discussing all of those different types of memories in the coming weeks. But in this unit, we are only going to cover sensory memory and short-term memory. Okay. Atkinson and Shiffrin developed a classic three-stage theory of memory, and we use this frequently, even today. The first stage is sensory memory. I have a visual system, I have an auditory system, I have smells, I have tactile information. If I were to see something or hear something or touch something with no memory whatsoever of what I had seen just a fraction of a second before, or felt or heard a fraction of a second before, the world would be chaos, right? There would be no way for us to figure out anything continuous in this world. So sensory memory is a very brief memory store that each of our sensory systems has. So you've got a visual memory, you have auditory memory, smell, touch, and they hang on for information just for a brief period of time. A lot of information goes into sensory memory. Most of it doesn't come out, but a stream of information that does come out of sensory memory goes into short-term memory. And as you'll see in the coming slides, short-term memory holds on to a handful of things about 15-20 seconds. Then finally, if what the information that's in short-term memory is actually useful to you in some ways, it has meaning, or you work with it a long time, then that information might get transferred into long-term memory. And we'll spend several weeks actually talking about different kinds of long-term memory. As far as scientists know, long-term memory has an infinite capacity, and as far as we know, the information that you get into long-term memory stays there until you die. Of course, finding it is another question. Atkinson and Shiffrin also had another component to their model, and that was control processes, aspects of memory that you have control over. So, for example, if I really want to remember something, I direct my attention to that thing, right? That's an intentional strategy. If something's important or I might need that information later, I can work intentionally to make that information more meaningful. These are things that students need to do all the time to remember information. Another technique that students use is rehearsal, saying it or writing it down over and over again. As you'll see in future units on memory, rehearsal in and of itself is not a good strategy, even if it is a common one. Okay, let's start with sensory memory. I've titled this unit Playing with Sparklers because the experience that you have when you play with a sparkler is fundamentally dependent on sensory memory. So a sparkler is basically a stick. I'll use this pen, a stick with a little point of light, right? A little fire at the end of the stick. And what people have long done with sparklers is to make circles with them, as the little girl's doing in this picture, or maybe write your name with them. Now, we have the experience that, say I make a circle motion with the sparkler, that somehow there's a trail of light that is physically present in the world. And there isn't. The trail, the circle that you see, it's all in your head. Your visual system experiences that trail because of sensory memory. That's a classic example of sensory memory. So when you're making little circles with your sparkler, there's only one point of light. That's all that's physically there. The trail that you see is something that results from sensory memory. The same thing works for lightning, right? Lightning is a point of light, but we don't experience it that way. So sensory memory is when you obtain sensory information and hold onto it for a very brief amount of time. The decay of information disappears from sensory memory quite quickly. The persistence of vision, that comes from sensory memory. Another example is when you go to the movies. Now, we know that the movies consists of film, at least still does, and film is, say, static pictures taken one rapidly after the other. If we did not have sensory memory, we would see static pictures. We wouldn't have any way to combine or integrate the information across the different static pictures in film. So sensory memory is a very important friend to everybody who likes movies. Okay. Come right back and we'll talk more about the studies that have been conducted to understand how long sensory memory lasts and how much information you can hold in sensory memory.